Hello. Hello, police. Yeah, what's the problem, sir? We just drove down our farm track. Yeah. Go and feed our pheasants. We come across a Range Rover with 3 people in it. Yeah. It appears that they're dead. I don't know what's happening. Blood in the motor all over them.
And welcome back to a new video on the Essex Boys case. As always, if you are enjoying the content, please do give the video a thumbs up. And if you're interested in the Essex Boys case, or simply true crime in general, don't forget to hit the subscribe button below. Now, before I start this video, it's important for me to mention that the author does not seek to discredit any previous accounts or versions of events leading up to the gruesome murders. He merely offers an interesting alternative scenario to be considered. That was the end of the night for Clive. But the branch gang were all set for a late one. The fridge was full of beers and the curry had finally arrived. They listened to the crew in the nightclub who ended up at a party in Emerson Park. Paul ended up having a lock-in at another pub in Dagenham where he managed to knock someone out just for the fun of it. Because that's what he did, when he felt like it. The crew on the pub in Cranham went to a club in Ilford, then dispersed to various locations to continue their debauchery with various partners, in their cases all of the opposite sex. The night could have gone differently, but it didn't. Bill was surprised how relaxed the team had been from the offset. Bill had thought they should have the armed response units on standby all over the place. D.I. Ellis had said to him early on, "Bill, this won't turn into a bloodbath, don't worry about it. They all know how much is at stake, and Clive is always overkill on his organisation. It's as much a show for his own guys as anything else. The team on the pub in Cranham now, I reckon they would have gone through with it if they'd got a call. But think about the effect it has on them, knowing how much he covers, every possible scenario. It's as much keeping his own firm under manners as dealing with Paul's crew. In a few weeks the whispers will seep out and everyone who needs to know will know that he was ready to retaliate at the first sign of a threat. He didn't really think for one moment that Paul was really going to try anything, but his crew won't ever know that, and Paul might just get to hear about it as well. He'll be even more wary of Clive in the future. It was always a win-win for Clive the moment that Paul opened his gob and said he wanted the meat. 10 days after the Friday night live show, the transcripts were discussed, along with material relating to it received in the days following the meeting between Clive and Paul. Clive had been right. Paul was heard discussing the bit of gear one of his minions had relieved a Dutch driver of. The old guy who they had taken the gear from had no idea, and the kid who had done the bit of work for Paul was from out of town. He'd simply fucked back off to Clacton with his whack for the job and been told to keep his mouth shut. The kid from Clacton was an unknown, but there were always new faces looking to join the world of fast bucks, fast cars and even faster birds. It turned out the Clacton kid had a pretty full file at his local nick out on the Tendring Peninsula. He was just a regular headbanger and therefore not much of a significant interest to the branch. Anyone who was regularly arrested by the local forces for all sorts of stupidity was never going to warrant any serious attention from the branch teams. Clacton kid was an accident waiting to happen, and despite the fact he had performed a job for a very dangerous criminal whom they were interested in, there was no point adding him to their workload. The Clacton kid was probably chosen by Paul for the bit of work because he was just stupid enough to do anything for a fast buck and was totally expendable. If word ever started to go around about this kid from Clacton being in the frame for the robbery of a kilo of Charlie from a Dutchman up at the Thurrock Services, then the mates would hear it. If not before, then certainly at the same time as Old Guy. Paul would charge down to Clacton on Old Guy's behalf. It wasn't rocket science to work out the outcome. Whatever happened, Old Guy wouldn't be getting his gear back from some waster in Clacton, and he wouldn't expect to. So if Paul came back from the seaside with only blood on his hands, then no one would fall out. It was actually quite a clever move by Paul's standards, and the branch men gave him all due credit for it. Clive, never to their knowledge, bothered to make any inquiries as to who had robbed the gear, and as far as he was concerned it was all forgotten about on the intel report they had from the East London team a week later. Bill had taken the time the following week to read Clive's file. It made interesting reading, though Bill had the feeling something was missing from the file. A regular member of the public, someone like his Linda, would be horrified at most of the content. The man was capable of extreme violence and cruelty. The files listed a very large number of incidents attributed to the man by various intelligence sources. But Bill was more reflective in his assessment. He'd seen a lot of shit in another life, and Clive wouldn't be where he was if he wasn't prepared to do what he did. Just a month on the team, and he had learnt more than he had in all the years on the CID about just how much really went on in Essex and East London. This was no fairy story, and unlikely to ever have a happy ending. The gang thing was as old as time itself. The drugs had been around in the past, but they had been something for lowlifes and losers. Now that had all changed. Recreational drugs were part of the mainstream entertainment, part of civilised society's idea of fun. The money was flowing to the guys controlling it. They were learning fast and adapting to the world around them, faster than anyone could think possible. Certainly faster than the ability of the Crown Prosecution Services and the available legislation to keep them in check. Without the evil and the cruelty required to control his pack of dogs, Clive was perhaps someone to be admired. He was certainly a resourceful and intelligent man. He had his own mind and personal life strictly under control. Everything was carefully thought out, all possible scenarios and outcomes catered for. The man planned ahead, yet was able to adapt and be flexible if required. He was relentless in the pursuit of his goals. He would have fared well had he been born into a different time in the history of the world. Bill looked around at the guys in the Atlanta Boulevard office. They were all caught up in what they were doing. The mood was light-hearted and the banter flowed easily. None of them would have lasted 5 minutes on the streets with Clive. But then they didn't have to. They were cocooned in a veil of mystery, hidden under the thick blanket of the British establishment, which was the hardest and meanest gang on the street, and that was any street they chose. Clive was 1,000 times more ruthless than this bunch of guys, but he was nothing compared to the weight of what was hanging over him, and he had literally no idea. The frontline coppers on the street were far more at risk. They were the ones in harm's way. They had to put up with all sorts of crap being thrown in their faces, and sometimes they got hurt. Badly. Clive wasn't shy when it came to the boys in blue, and there were more than a few names in his file at the branch of coppers who had capitulated to his will. Some by coercion and sweets, some by fear. All way out of their depth. So who were these guys in this room to be so critical of the unfortunates in uniform who fell short of perfection? Bill knew it was a far from perfect world, but his eyes were being opened wider as each week passed. It would be easy to pass judgment from his position of privileged intelligence on people who fell short of what was expected. Bill Handley would always remember the world was a lot greyer to the boys on the street. Most people never really intended to stray from their course in life. It just happened. Some would be damned, some would not. Bill would keep his eyes and ears open and try to help things for the better. And remember why he became a police officer, he told himself. "How are you finding the work then, Bill?" It was Detective Superintendent Spenlove asking the question. He had come to see D.I. Ellis as he did often. Spenlove liked to get out of the yard, it was said, at any opportunity, and get amongst the various teams around London who came under his umbrella. He was neither formal nor invasive on the visits he made. According to D.S. Wright, who took it upon himself to fill Bill in on the politics of the office from the onset. Darrell was the office go-to man, if you wanted to know something on procedural or political matters. DCI Edwards was the unit's immediate superior, but Spenlove seemed to like getting amongst the troops whenever possible. Interesting, and I suppose a bit frustrating at the same times, if you can understand that, sir. By frustrating, are you referring to a lack of action, Bill? I suppose I am, yeah. It's knowing what's going on and having to let it go. It's difficult sometimes. You understand it's the enormity of the criminal enterprises. They run them as if they're regular business with an almost arrogant impunity. Spenlove took a chair and pulled it up to the side of Bill's desk. He leaned in closer and eyed Bill closely. Nothing intimidating, just gauging the mood of the man in front of him as he prepared his next question. I understand the basic principles of a man who becomes a police officer and the usual reasons for joining the force. Other than just a career with a decent pension, of course. Spenlove chuckled at the last words, then took on a serious and hushed tone as he continued. But Bill, we face lots of threats to our society, to our way of life, and the country we want our kids to grow up in. They all have to be met in different ways. A traffic cop role is different to that of a copper on the beat, and again that is different from the role of a CID officer. We have a completely different role to all of them, yet our ultimate aims are all the same: to protect and serve our communities. The information you are now privileged to has to be dealt with in a measured way. What we have here is a serious and very real threat to society. And yes, we could go out tomorrow morning, knock down a whole load of front doors. It would achieve two things. First, we would show our hand. Secondly, it would create a huge void in a multi-million-pound consumer supply chain. As you know, the evidence we have is not admissible in a court of law for use as prosecution evidence. It is merely intelligence. Yes, from what we know, we would be able to collect sufficient material evidence at the same time to at least charge a considerable number of people with numerous offences. Initially, we could say a lot of our information came from informants within the criminal community, but it wouldn't take too long before people started to ask, even insist, we name our sources, and you know the courts are all too happy to support those requests. We will then start to see cases falling apart as we have to gradually pull back on what we can actually prove. As you know from your time here, there are some very cautious and clever characters out there on our radar. They are seldom very close to anything we could actually stick on them, and they don't make our lives easy. So what would we achieve, other than to take a few of them out of play for maybe a year or two while we drag them through the court process, having to see them ultimately walk free, laughing at us? The other thing you must realise, the amount of money involved. If we remove the criminal structures which have established themselves, then the chaos which would ensue to maintain the very real demand for recreational drugs would potentially be more destructive and violent than anything happening at the moment. We would also be starting from ground zero again and have to rebuild the whole picture, the one that we are now able to see very clearly. Now look, I understand all the measures and all the reasons, it's just where do we go with it all? We know the majority of what's going down on the street, we actually know all the guys we're looking at are crooks and a lot of them are making a bloody fortune. What's the point if we can't nick them for something? Do we just let them carry on, amassing vast fortunes, paying no tax, and watching kids get fucked up on the shit that they sell? I think the only bit I don't mind is when they talk about doing each other in. Trouble is that part of it is all just bollocks and hot air. It'd almost be nice if they did start doing each other in. Bill laughed as he finished. He was only half serious and didn't want Spendlove to take his last comment too seriously. I hear you, Bill. Don't worry, I often let my imagination get the better of me on that score as well. But I gather you've worked out that most of the violence spoken about is just hot air. There are incidents, even some very nasty ones, where someone is badly hurt, but usually most of the stupid stuff is just kids getting fucked up and out of hand. They are not usually on our radar until after the event, when each side starts looking to take things a little bit further. To be honest, when all the stuff starts, it's the status quo and the organisations of the heavier players who we're interested in. They're the ones who actually keep things from escalating to something really silly. They usually extract a few quid from each side, make a bit of noise for show, and it all quietens down. The local old Bill doesn't realise how much easier their lives are with these bastards actually in play. Do any of them actually really kill each other, Gov? Bill kept the question light-hearted. You've seen the files, Bill, on the guys we're looking at? Spendlove answered without taking it anywhere. I have. There are a few question marks against some of the players. It seems to be more against the old guard who aren't in play anymore, although Clive's file has some large gaps in it, and some redacted stuff. One or two of the old guard, as you call them, have some possible killings against their names for sure, but as you'll have noted, those are only opinions based on uncorroborated evidence, and more often than not, a body was never found. So it's just a rumour mill, but usually that's fairly accurate on the historical stuff. Back then, we never had this sort of access to information. It was just traditional old-style policing, grasses and the odd kicking in the cells to extract information. It was Spendlove's turn to laugh. Bill joined in. What about more recently? Bill was curious, but kept things light. Well, the fella you just mentioned, now he's a dangerous animal. Some of that redacted stuff even I haven't seen. Now he's definitely capable, and I have him down for several mysterious disappearances of competitors. Unfortunately, he's a difficult one. He's sort of surveillance savvy, not in a technical way, just in the fact he's able to drop right off the grid. There are a few of the mysterious disappearances of people which tie up with him being on the missing list at the same time. Trouble is, while he's ranting and raving at someone, nothing ever really happens. Now when he's being quiet is when he's at his most deadly. It's more a case of we've had someone he should be having a go at and nothing's happened. Then we lose sight of him. He totally vanishes off the grid. When he resurfaces, we have a missing person. So we put 2 and 2 together and get 4. But he's given us nothing to work with, and no bloody body. So what are you going to do about him then? Well, unless we see him do something black and white like a murder and have him dead to rights in the frame, then nothing at all. He suits us just fine where he is. You're serious, aren't you? Bill wasn't sure what to make of what he just heard. Was someone above the law, he was asking himself. Now, Bill, don't think for one moment that he has any sort of license to carry on the way he does. It's just for now. He suits our purpose. We let him run his little empire. We watch and we wait. When he no longer serves us, then he goes. How do you manage that, and when do you or whoever decide the time is right for him to go? Bill couldn't help sound serious with the very serious question he had just asked. When he no longer serves our purpose, Bill, as I told you. And when is that likely to happen? How can you be confident you'll be able to come up with something that will stick on him in the future? From my understanding of things, the top guys, if they have any sense, move further and further from the zone of prosecution. They think they do, Bill. They think they do. But the world is changing, and just like Al Capone, it's the money and success which will nail them to the wall, along with their insatiable greed. Look, Clive keeps the peace. We know what he's behind and what he controls. We know he's looking at acquiring the odd legitimate business here and there. We know he's washing up some of his crooked cash. We know he's getting friendly accountants and lawyers and even bank managers. He sees himself as being a wealthy and legitimate businessman one day. He's sensible enough to realise he don't want to end up sat around Canning Town like some ancient old has-been, and he doesn't want his kids in on this racket either. He thinks he sees the writing on the wall. The future. Well, I'm telling you, he hasn't got a clue what's waiting for him. While he controls his turf with fear, and he's out there on offer, he serves our purpose. We have a very clear view of him, and he helps keep the waters tranquil. He knows he can't stay there forever, and he's planning for his retirement even now. He's no fool. He won't stay till the end and let some young buck take him down. He knows it's a job with an end date, and he will, when he feels he's secured enough for his legitimate lifestyle to replace the old one, start to look to hand things over to his more capable subordinates. Maybe the brother. Who knows? But we will know from all we see and hear using the technology we have now. And we will have even better in the future when he has exhausted his usefulness to us. We will know when his removal from circulation will have no effect on the status quo in East London and the surrounding areas. And when that time comes, just when he is looking at the good life and his retirement to the country estate squarely in the face, then his world will collapse around him. We will move on all the straight players he has surrounded himself with. We will pull strokes that will make his moves over the years look like child's play. Every institution he deals with will shrink away from him. Banks will call him facilities and close accounts. We will let the media run a number on him. We will turn him into a social pariah for any regular citizen. The criminal fraternity will politely distance themselves from him. He will have so much media attention heaped upon him, he will not be able to criticise his old cronies for staying away. He will become isolated and vulnerable, as his legitimate businesses are torn to pieces by Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs. If they can manage to get one thing right for once, it would be helpful, and I hope they bloody do. We have all the skeletons in all his closets, and we will hand the whole lot to them on a plate. All the bank accounts, all the companies he controls directly or indirectly. We have it all. Then watch how many people start to come out of the woodwork once his reign of fear is over. There will be no good life, no sailing off into the sunset for Clive. His retirement plan ain't going to happen. It's going to be a small cell in the maximum security for the rest of his days when we are ready for him. His entire accumulated wealth will be systematically stripped from him. His family will be lucky to get a council house. He will be forgotten and the world will move on without him. Fuck me, that's brutal. Can you do that? Bill was slightly stunned by the ferocity of the delivery from Superintendent Spendlove. We can, and we will. Some of the laws are not yet in place, but by the time we are ready for Clive, it will be a crime to walk down the road with 10 grand in your pocket without a bloody good reason why and where you got it from. Every grubby little lawyer and accountant he thinks he has in his pocket will roll over in an instant. Once we have pulled his teeth, trust me, the people that step out in front of him today with a hand outstretched looking for his recognition and blessing, they will shrink into the shadows when they see him coming 10 years from now. And he's not the only one. Anyone in the country who thinks they are bigger than the system will learn the fall the same way. The B team over in North London are on the same list. When they think they can walk away, that's when they no longer serve our purpose. Then all their nightmares will come true. They will all go the same way. Remember, they only get to stay in play while they serve our purpose. When they think they can get off the treadmill, then that's when their worlds fall apart. This has all been thought through, hasn't it? Yes, Bill, far more devious and cruel than the likes of you and I come up with these strategies. I have to be honest, I'm glad I'm not out there on the wrong side. What about the legalities of it all? Legalities of what? What was it I was just saying? It's gone right out of my head. Anyway, Bill, keep up the good work. The more we know, the stronger we are. With that, Spendlove stood, smiled, and turned towards D.I. Ellis's office door, where Ellis had been standing for the last few minutes. Bill thought the moment had been rather surreal. Spendlove was already disappearing into the governor's office. As Bill looked up again at the man, he gently shut the door behind him. For the first time, Bill quietly asked himself what sort of world he was living in. He remembered his old life briefly, and realised the British establishment would never just be sat on its arse while the likes of Clive and the other crooks were making a fortune on the streets of Britain. They would always want their pound of flesh, and were capable of anything. He had known it a long time ago, and he had just been reminded of it in case he had ever forgotten. The super just give you his vision for the future there, boyo? Sergeant Bale had just taken the chair vacated by Detective Superintendent Spendlove. Something like that, I think. Bill was still in thought and answered subconsciously. I think everyone in here has had something similar, boyo. The Welsh twang on the boyo brought Bill back to focus. Bale was becoming a friend, and Bill liked working with him. Playing the long game, aren't they? Yes, boyo, they sure are. We just keep watching and gathering information, building the files. Someone up there has a master plan, of that you can be sure. But when does it end? This could go on forever. Bill, it has been going on forever. There's always been crooks, boyo. Yeah, I guess you're right. Difference is, we now know exactly what they're up to, who they are, and where they are. It's like some crazy game, watching and being powerless to act. Well, yes and no. We're not powerless. Did he tell you the top boys never get to retire? Never get to enjoy the fruits of their labours? Yeah, I got that bit. That was just before he forgot the conversation ever happened. Has no one ever blown the whistle on the level of surveillance going on here? You know, gone to the press with it? Bill, come on, boyo. You've seen the capabilities here. And that is just what we know about. Would you seriously want to piss this firm off? If they suspected that someone was a threat, do you think that they wouldn't know about it? The moon wouldn't be far enough away to take a crap in private. Bill's mood lightened as he looked at the grinning sheepshagger. Yeah, I suppose you're right, Mike. It just gets a bit frustrating, you know. It'd be good to go out and feel a collar now and then. I miss that part of the job. We do get to feel more than the collar, mate. It's just that you don't get to feel your hands round the bugger's neck. Bit like porn. It's all virtual reality, so you've got to let your imagination finish the job for you. The image of Bale jerking off over sheep videos flashed through Bill's mind as he struggled to keep the grin on his face under control. Well, when does that ever happen? Well, sometimes we put something together here ourselves and the boss passes on a recommendation. We get to listen to the local boys go and do the business. The live scene the other night. If we thought that something was going to be more than what it was, then we make a recommendation. Somehow they get the information into the local boys. They then mount an operation like it's their own idea. How does that happen? Well, I'm not 100% sure, to be honest with you. It's above my pay grade, but I have my suspicions. And what are they? Well, look, it's just a theory that me and Daryl have. Well, we have a couple of theories, actually. One of them is that there's this boyo over in Basildon who is listed as a local informant. Well, we think he's actually one of us. But don't ever repeat that and don't ever let anyone know that it came from me. The bugger's even done a bit of bird and serves up a few of the dealers. So if he is, he's one committed fucker. And occasionally the local guys even manage to get there all on their own. Bale burst into a hearty Welshy laugh, and Bill joined in. Seriously, Bill, we do make a difference on a regular basis. You'll work it out yourself. Watch how the local boys get their results and the effect it has on the big picture. You'll see it if you look. Well, how's that then? Take a look at Clive. He was having a bit of work coming through from Spain up through France and onto the UK last year. He knows the transport job is risky through Europe in August. Everyone's supposed to be on holiday in France. We picked up on it in May and we let him have a few loads home. Just a bit of puff from Morocco. Now the runs were nice and smooth, and to be honest, it was a good bit of transport. Big straight firm. It's all in the file, so I'll tell you. It was a bloody Royal Mail truck, and God knows how they got the driver on board, but they did. The old boy had been a straight goer all his life. Anyway, they run a few loads up and got confident. We knew they'd roll it up, they just got bigger each time. The last one was due the second week of July. By now, we had the slaughter in France where they were putting it on the Royal Mail truck, the warehouse in Murcia where it went on the transport to get into France, and the slaughter in San Pedro where they collected the parcel together from the guys out of Gibraltar with the fast ribs. There was a little Scouser crew working in San Pedro with the Gibraltans vacuum packing the gear to beat the custom dogs on the ferry. The warehouse in Murcia was rented through a dummy firm here in Essex, and the farm in France was in the name of some firm out of Gibraltar. It took us in East London a couple of months to get the whole job. Now I know it was all our intel and no one else could have seen the whole picture like we had it. Well, guess what? The last run up of the summer, the lorry has 2 tons of your best Moroccan soap in the back all neatly vacuum packed. How far does that truck get? I'll tell you. It gets a controlled stop going uphill coming out of Dover. The farm in France, as we know, doesn't get a look, nor the place in Murcia. But guess what? At the exact same moment, Spanish old Bill moves on the place in San Pedro. There are a few hundred kilos of puff on site, along with all the packing gear and several pissed off Scousers. Now that ain't no coincidence, is it? The places in Murcia and France don't get a look, even though I doubt they would have found anything there. If any other outfit was on the job, then they would have definitely hit those places as well. What makes you say that? Well, normal policing. If you're following something from A to D, you would also raid B and C. It's only a devious firm like us that don't. Now the ensuing mess we created, as well as letting the Kent and Spanish old Bill have a nice result, was Clive had rolled up his stake and lost a lot, so he's back to square one where he started and lost a nice delivery mechanism, which was extremely unlikely to have fallen over under normal policing methods. The even better bit, the Scousers gave him a lump of the parcel on bail, so now there will be friction between the two firms, distrust and fingers pointed. Both organisations have had their operations seriously dented. Not terminal for either, but it keeps them in check. So you see, we're really getting to control the big game of gangster chess from on high, without them even having a clue. Okay, look, I get it, but does it ever get out of hand? Look, these guys are all about making money first and foremost. They're all greedy, so very predictable. And we do just enough to destabilise but not destroy them. Every time they think they are going to take a big score and step back, we pull the rug, so they have to stay in the game. Clive has to step out of the shadows, along with the top dog from the Scouse firm. They have to find a way to get past the loss, save face, and both more than anything need to fill the void the holes have left so that next year they'll be working again. And we will be watching. You have been listening to the book Once Upon a Time in Essex. This book is available to purchase online at Amazon and other online book retailers. Many thanks for joining me for this video. Very shortly you'll be able to see some other videos from the channel, including the Essex Boys playlist, which has all of the videos concerning this case in one convenient folder. If you like this video, please do give it a thumbs up. If you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing. I look forward to seeing you all again in the next video. Take care. Cheers.